Hello everybody, and welcome to the first chapter of the online lectures in the Enterprise Security class. My name's Diane Burke, and I'm your instructor for this class. I have been teaching this for several years. I've gone through a few development iterations on this. Actually, years ago we taught this as a face-to-face class, which I enjoyed quite a bit. But we've moved into a online version of this class. So here we go. I want to make sure that you get some lecture material because I do think that in addition to the concepts discussed in the book, I can give you some real-world experience and examples of things that I've run into in my years of computing. I have been working with computers since in the 1980s. We're going to start with Chapter 1. There's some pretty good background information. And one of the things that they discuss early in the chapter is that when you're talking about security, you've got a different mindset than you normally do when you're talking about general technical things. I think when you focus on servers or workstations or communications, you're actually trying to accomplish something and make something happen. When you talk about security, you kind of turn that around and you're looking at what do you want to prevent, what are the risks, what are the downsides, what are the opportunities for bad things to happen. Sometimes it's a little difficult to make that shift. I would say I'm a pretty positive person, but when it comes to computer networks, I'm so ingrained in terms of looking at things from an aspect of what are the vulnerabilities here? What are the costs to the business if we have some sort of a disaster? And I think that's going to serve you well if you can get into that mindset, because most clients don't necessarily think of things like that, and if you can present that information to them in a compelling way and have some authority behind it, they're going to look at you and think, wow, you really know what you're talking about. Speaking of that, when you're working either for clients or for an industry, I think that most people today, when they're interviewing candidates for IT, are looking for some security experience. Now, this particular class, you get a lot of theory. We don't have practical labs with this, but I think that even the theory that you have is going to be useful to you. This course is almost a lockstep to prepare you for the Security Plus exam. And for those of you who have a B average or higher, at the end of the class, you'll be eligible to purchase a voucher through the COT to take the exam. I don't have current pricing on that. I'll post that in the Blackboard shell. And when you purchase it through the COT, you get about half price on that. If you'd like, I pretty much lecture straight through the book, and so it might be useful to follow through the book as you listen to these. I'm not going to have page numbers in there because I put page numbers in the first iteration of this, and when they came out with a new book, all my page numbers were messed up, so I'll just go topic by topic. And the section that I'm in right now is called Understanding Information Security, and they do have a figure here that has a security triangle. The three corners of that are physical security, management security, and operational security. I think most of us have a pretty good idea of physical security. You want locked doors. A lot of times you'll lock down the server room, or you'll somehow restrict physical access to the server. Operational security is making sure that you have safeguards in place through your OS, you're up to date on security fixes, you've got your firewall enabled, and that sort of thing. The component of this diagram that may be unfamiliar to you is management. And this deals with policies that you set in an organization. Just setting policies is obviously not enough. You can set all sorts of policies, but unless you actually follow through and implement them, you pretty much have 1/3 of your security triad that's not functional for you. And so a lot of what we'll cover in here are policies and management decisions that you may be involved in or you may just have to carry out. But that is a pretty important component. In the section about securing the physical environment, pretty much what you're looking at is how can you protect your assets. The best practice that I've always heard as a good rule of thumb is make sure that you've got 2 locked doors between the outside of your building and the server room. Small businesses here in Missoula may not do that at all. You may just have the front door that's locked and everything else is accessible. It's a good idea to always mention it to the client. They can just tell you, that's not feasible, that's not going to happen, but it's a good idea to remind your client of the exposure. If somebody breaks in, they could pick up the server, unplug it, walk out with it. They could do the same thing with all the hard drives, not even take the computers, but just pull the hard drives. What's the risk of compromise? First of all, you're looking at data loss, but you're also looking at your information getting into the hands of a competitor. When you frame it that way, they may be a little more concerned about security. So the first thing that you do when you're looking at physical security is you want to provide a deterrent. You want to make it hard for people to get in and compromise your system. And you can do this with security guards, key card systems, multiple locks, different things you can do to make it harder to steal your stuff. I remember in one of the Mission Impossible movies, Tom Cruise ended up coming in through an air vent. He couldn't touch the floor, and some organizations do go to that level of security. The next component of physical security is actually figuring out if somebody has come in. If somebody breaks a window, gets in, and pulls all your hard drives and walks out with them, that's kind of obvious. If somebody comes in and maybe takes backup tapes, you may not notice that right off the bat. Or people could come in and maybe clone hard drives or lift thumb drives or take laptops that may be in a pool or something for checkout. Some of those things may not be so obvious. It is important for you to have some sort of a system in place so you know that. Even in terms of getting rid of old devices, it's important to make sure that your hard drives are clean and that you're not inadvertently giving away secure information. The last component of physical security happens after you have detected a threat and you've actually had a theft or some sort of loss of data. Essentially, that involves a business continuity plan or disaster recovery. At the very least, it involves backups and making sure that you have backup media or your information so that you can restore that to a new device and get going again. We'll see when we get into the chapter on disaster recovery that for many small businesses who experience a pretty significant data loss, they end up going out of business because they just don't have a good disaster recovery plan and they really can't recover and continue business. Moving on to the next corner, we're looking at operational security. And this really deals with securing your computers, your networks, and you tend to do this with software. Operational security issues include network access control, authentication, VPNs, different segregation techniques that you have for maybe segregating different parts of your network. It also includes backup plans, recovery plans, and one of the things that we'll do this semester is you will go through and create a limited scope disaster recovery. So pretty much operational security is everything that isn't related to design or physical security. There is a section in here on surveying your physical environment. And this, I think, is a good sequence of questions to ask yourself and maybe to go over with your clients or with your manager just to make sure that they're aware of what the risks are. Any environment has risks, and it depends how much money you want to throw at those risks to mitigate them, or if you think you've got an acceptable risk-expense ratio there. I think that in terms of your work as a professional, making sure that the client understands the full spectrum of what's going on is one of the duties that you really need to take upon yourself. The next section is working with management and policies. This is kind of a tricky area, because people who work in the IT profession know very well how important it is to have good policies in place. Management can ask you to develop these policies and you can put a lot of work into them, but in terms of implementing them, unless you've got management supporting you, you're pretty much going to be spinning your wheels. And so you need to make sure that you have management buying in. Otherwise, the best policy in the world isn't really going to increase your security. The book has a real-world scenario about surveying your operational environment. Most of these are things that organizations should consider and should have a policy in place, even if it's a minimal one, that describes what you need to do about that. Most companies, if for no other reason, will have some sort of a computer usage policy just to cover themselves in the event of liability. And normally what you'll do is that will be in the employee handbook, and somebody either has to sign off that they've read it or they actually have to sign off on the policy. That's at least a first step in putting together some policies there.